Hey girl, Marissa here. You are listening to the Codependent Dummy podcast. As a young woman, you have been raised, reinforced, and rewarded for putting the needs of others above your own. Now, in your 20s, you're finding yourself exhausted, exasperated, and enveloped in shit relationships, especially the one you have with yourself. Codependency is a way of being where we put the feelings, wants, and needs of others above our own in an unconscious attempt to meet our own feelings, wants, and needs. Sorry to break it to you, sis, but that is not sustainable. This podcast is to help you undo all that so you can stop playing small and start taking up space, you dummy. Let's get to it. Oh, hello, everyone. Coming to you live in our cheetah print. We have animal print. We have Miss Adriana Rodriguez. She is a first-gen queer Latinx licensed marriage and family therapist based in Sacramento, and she works with folks all around California. Adriana specializes in working with BIPOC and first-gen millennials committed to breaking generational cycles while living with intention and authenticity. Adriana is a wife, a tía, that's aunt in Spanish, a coffee lover, an amateur barista who adores her fur babies and her plant kids. Adriana, thank you for coming on the podcast.
I'm so excited and so thankful for the invitation.
Awesome. Well, it's no mystery. The first question is always the same, but I'm going to break it into two parts. So, How do you conceptualize codependency, and why do you conceptualize it that way?
Yeah, I've been kind of sitting with that through the week as I was thinking about coming on, right? And I realized that codependency is not a word that I use a whole lot. And so I was trying to think about why not, and how do I talk about this dynamic, right, between people in relationships instead, since I'm not using codependency. And so as I was sitting thinking about this question, what I realized is that what I do talk about a lot is about attachment wounds and about insecure attachment, right? Which is kind of this way that when we are not when we are in insecure relationships, right? Or relationships that bring up this insecure feelings, this anxious feelings about our closeness and our distance, we may be wanting to rebuild that connection over and over by like acts of service, by communicating, by over texting, and creating this feeling of anxiety that if I don't hear back, or that if my gifts or my words of affirmation or whatever ways that you're trying to express that is not responded, that it creates kind of like a sense of chaos inside. And so thinking about codependency, right, like this way in which when we enter relationships and we give, and we're not receiving back, we then give some more. And at some point, right, we end up fulfilling our own needs of feeling wanted or feeling needed, but it's not necessarily reciprocal from the other person. It's us just ongoingly kind of shutting down the anxiety by doing more and more and more to remain connected. So that's kind of a little bit of how I conceptualize codependency. And also one of the things that I do within my work, because I work with a lot of first-gen millennials, right? Like children of immigrants, families that tend to be very connected and sometimes dangerously over enmesh. And so I always also try to frame these conversations around how much we're showing up for others, at what cost to us, right? This showing up for others, while also balancing interdependency and communal, right? And community and collectivism, because they're values of a lot of the people that I work with. And so kind of always that making the difference that when we're in codependent relationships, there is like this unhealthy sort of anxiety always looming with everything that we do when we engage in this relationship, versus an interdependent relationship or a collective sort of approach to being in relationship, which is I can care about others while also being an individual and while not feeling that I'm constantly sacrificing myself to serve, to give, or to please whoever the recipient is.
Right.
My short, long answer.
Well, no, what stands out is codependence. We give, we don't necessarily receive in a distributed, fair, reciprocating manner. We might not receive any. And we come to a likely unconscious conclusion. What if I give more?
Exactly. Like somehow what you're doing is not enough, right? Like it's not enough. And so it's like, I'm going to give more, right? Instead of kind of stopping back and saying like, wait, let me examine what's happening here. Like why if I'm giving, I'm either feeling that I'm not receiving back or right. Like asking those questions and stopping instead of just like, let me just give more and more because it must be something that I'm doing or not doing that is leading to these feelings.
Right. It's not reflective of the other person not doing or not being enough in a relationship. Yeah, we just keep it all within ourselves. Yeah, we don't look at what they're not giving or doing. We sense we're not giving or doing enough.
Yeah, I think in that what is missing is that sense of accountability, right? That when we are in a relationship, there is a way that is like, we call it a two-way street, right? With the meaning that there's accountability in both parts. If I am giving and I'm not receiving or I'm not feeling reciprocated, right? What is the other side of the street also? How do they are participating? How are they accountable? But most people who find themselves in these situations where they are codependent or they are overgiving or they are insecure about their relationship and their attachment in that relationship, it centers the self as the only one or the one mainly responsible versus also looking at the other person and what they may or may not be doing to participate right in the cycle.
Yeah. Accountability, responsibility. Yeah. And equal shares, right? Sometimes we give more, sometimes we're more accountable. Sometimes other people are supposed to give more or be more accountable. Yeah. And so thinking about codependency, attachment wounds, insecure attachment, do you have any experiences of that to share with us from your own life?
Oh my gosh, like I would say, like as I was thinking about it, right? Just like codependent in recovery, 100%, right? Especially, I think for me, particularly the dynamic of being a daughter of immigrants and being an immigrant myself, right? So just kind of like a little quick backtrack of my own personal history, just gonna fit in with the topic.
Yeah.
I grew up in El Salvador, right? There was a big civil war in the 80s that led to a lot of Salvadoran people to be displaced and to both documented and undocumented sort of leave the country out of, physical safety, lack of opportunity, lack of jobs, literally having to sleep on the floor because you can hear gunshots and wounds and bombs and things like that. That's an experience that is like personal to me, right? And so at some point, my parents made the decision that they had to leave, but because I knew that the hardship that it would cost to bring two small children, myself and my sibling, we were very young, they decided to immigrate first. And then my sibling and I stayed back in El Salvador. And we were separated for 9 years. So I was 6 years old, reunited with them again once like I was about to be 16. So it's like a whole, all those years of growth that a parent is getting to know their child, that is getting to, facilitate their learning, their discipline, right? Like all these things, they were not present for that, right? And so then we reunite back. They left that little girl. They come back to a teenager who had experienced a lot of hardships for different reasons, right? But who wanted more than anything to be loved and be wanted by her parents because as a little kid, when you experience a separation from your parents, right? Like the world of kids are very self-centered. And it's like, what did I do? Am I not wanted? Am I not loved? Right. And so that is like a recipe for my own experiences with codependency, because coming back and reuniting with them, the messaging was, I need to do everything in my power to have their good graces, because they don't know me, right? And it wasn't like this clear. Like I understand this now after much therapy, after becoming a therapist, right, and doing the work.
Right, not conscious thoughts, but not unconscious behaviors, agreements, commitments that you made, your vows that you made. Yeah.
Along with the expectations of many Latinx folks, right, within the culture, that children and parents kind of have this hierarchical sort of relationship in which parents are at the top and then children are at the bottom, right? But one of the things that was unique about me particularly is that I had grown up into like a very independent kid, because my grandma was, was like an elderly woman, and I had a lot of freedom. I had the way that I navigated my life was like as an independent kid. Like it was just like, I went here, I went there, I did this, I did that. Not a lot of permission asking, not a lot of need to be checking in with anybody. It's just like, I do what I need to do. And so then I come in and I suddenly have parents who have this big expectations and this rules that I was never like really consensually informed, or like, what do you think about it? Right. That's not how our families, like my family worked. It was just like, now you're here and you're under my roof, and until you move out or you pay your bills or whichever comes first, you are going to do whatever I say. And that was really, really hard. So instead at that point, right, as a younger person, I wasn't thinking about like, wait, this is kind of unfair. Like we haven't seen each other in 10 years. Come on, let's talk about this, right? Like as a kid, you don't have that. I always felt that I was too rebellious, that I had too big of a mouth, that I was like not respectful enough, and so that sense of guilt, that sense of worry that I am somehow failing my parents because I can see they're unhappy with me. I can see that we're in this conflicts all the time, led me to then kind of flip the switch and to say, I need to be like the goodest kid ever. And that means sacrificing my voice, my wants, my needs over whatever I thought would please them, right? But because there wasn't a lot of clarity about what necessarily they needed for them to feel that I was being a good kid to them, there was always this confusion about their expectations and my doing that just quite didn't hit the target, right? But then it led to, it's a me problem. I'm not being a good daughter. I'm not being a good kid. So I just got to do more and more and more. And so it took me into like the cycle of self-sacrificing over and over and over again, that while felt the right thing to do, it also left me with like myself just feeling not good enough, right? Not feeling that I could just like, is this something that I'm doing? So there wasn't that accountability and that two-way street, which is very common, right? Like in parent and child relationships, but I wasn't a little kid. I was a teenager, right? Like at this point, I had a voice and thoughts, and my own experiences had allowed me to make decisions, well-sounded decisions. I was a good kid by all means. It's just that I had questions and I was oppositional, and and I said oppositional in quote marks because what I was doing was just asking like, but why do you want me to do that, right? But he felt oppositional because he wasn't just like, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, right? Okay, sir, like in whatever way, like that sounds like in everybody's family. In my house, the expectation was a very hierarchical, respectful relationship in which you just say yes to your parents, regardless of what the ask is. Right. And that was hard for a kid that had been hyper independent because of the same circumstances. Right. So, and then we had the attachment, the separation, that breaking the attachment for those 9-10 years that, we didn't have the tools to recognize even that had happened. We were just supposed to jump back in as if those 10 years never happened. And that caused a lot of issues. And I could see them later on my 20s, further than just within my family, this like need to overcompensate and overdo and always thinking that I'm somehow not doing enough. Once I started going out into the world and workplace or dating, this dynamic kept showing up of, if something is not going well in this relationship, it must be something that I'm doing and I'm not trying hard enough. I'm the one who's difficult. And so let me compensate by giving, not saying very much, not advocating for myself. And it took a while to recognize that, though there's always accountability that we have, right? Like that there are things that I needed to grow, there are things that I needed to learn. That one big part that was missing for me was the idea that other people can be held accountable, that you can have boundaries towards them, that you saying no can also be a caring gesture, right? That you giving will deplete you. So those were hard lessons to learn that really stem, I think, from a lot of these dynamics from my childhood and my teenagerhood within my family. That, right, again, one of the things that also I've had to do a lot of work around is like, how do I not blame my parents for not having the tools to parent me in a way that align more with the space that I was in as a more independent kid, right? Like as a more independent teen, they didn't have those skills.
Right.
And the reason they didn't have those skills is because these were people that fled a war, that were undocumented for many years, that were in survival mode, right? So it's like, how do I build compassion for the folks that for the people that didn't act in ways that were healthy to me, while also not fostering anger, because there are also the culpability of all the systems, right? Like the systems of oppression that lead immigrant parents to leave their land and cause like a lot of hardship emotionally on them,
right?
That they don't have resources to deal with, right? So it's been quite a journey to kind of like understand this like attachment wounds, this codependency, this giving more than I receive and being okay with that. And right, like it's I think it's gonna be like a lifelong sort of journey to be on, because different dynamics, different people kind of like bring it up, right? Like when that
Right.
little voice is like, you must not be doing the right thing, so give more,
Right.
still pops up. And so I think it's gonna be a lifelong journey. But I would say that that's kind of like a little capsule of my own journey or experiences with like codependency.
Mm-hmm. 2 questions. How are you fostering that compassion, like daily, right? Because of course, I think one thing I really try and stress for all you dear listeners is there's this hope, wish, dream, desire that if I say I have compassion for my mom and dad today and forever, and then my dad calls me and he's distracted, I'm like, Dad, why are you calling me when you can't talk to me? Call me when you can focus or something. Like, it's like, oh, what happened to that compassion? I just had this, this beautiful, so it's, it's not a one and done thing.
Absolutely.
It's a daily, like, okay, my dad's calling, deep breath in, compassion out. Hello. Oh, Dad, I hear you're distracted. Do you want to talk later? Okay. Love you. So how are you fostering that compassion? And we'll do the second one.
Yeah. That also I think is a daily just journey in which some days I'm more successful at than others. Right. And I think that that's just part of the journey, especially when you may be the person who's doing the work and it's like building, right? Like this building blocks, this rebuilding the foundation of the home that you've built of you, right? And it's like changing the bricks or changing like the rotten things, right? You're doing all this effort and then somebody comes in and it's just like completely unaware that you're doing all this work. Like those are the moments where like I feel my compassion like really tethers, and it's just like, I'm not being really compassionate right now because I'm just really upset because I'm the one that is like carrying over. Because in that example that you give, right, like this idea that when we're on the phone with a parental figure and we're saying, hey, you're not focused, like, can we talk later? It puts you back in the seat, right? Like in the directing seat, and the saying, hey, like, this is what's happening. Let me name the dynamic. Let me kind of lead you to the proper steps of how I would like to be treated. And that journey is tiring because there is this wish and fantasy that they get it, that they finally get it, and that they would say, you know what, like I just called you and I realized that I'm not in the place to be talking. Let me call you right back, right?
Yeah, that's the dream.
So, it's a dream. So it feels like a dream. And funny enough, you know, as much as it feels a dream to some of us, for other people, like they have family members, partners who are willing to enter in these journeys as well, right? But and in many cases, when we begin our healing process, the other people are not necessarily on board, and not that they're against it, but they are not on board for their own journey. And so there's always this like feeling that you're like ahead and kind of having to pull people with you, right? So then going back to this, like, how do you foster compassion? One of the things that I've had to let go is this expectation that people got to be at the same level that I'm at. Like my healing, my journey is centered on myself and it's for me. Do people benefit greatly from it? Absolutely. I think that everybody who's in a relationship with me benefits greatly from my work, and also highlights how little I benefit from the lack of work that they're doing, right? Like I'm not benefiting a lot from it. So balancing out this compassion for me looks like holding people accountable, whether letting them know and holding them accountable, or holding them accountable within me, right? Like they are not in a place that I want them to be. And so therefore my boundaries and my way that I show up needs to be adjusted because they're not meeting me where they're at. So I give a name, I recognize the feelings. It's not about avoiding them or about like, it is what it is, and like put them under the rug. No, like I get hurt and I have feelings too. And they're just not where I'm at with themselves. And it's not my responsibility to drag them along with me or to point out, right? Like you're doing this or you're doing that. That's theirs, right? And what it does is that for me to remain compassionate with myself is that I recognize that this is a lot of work for me to be this on in my head all the time with my relationships, especially the ones that could use a good amount of work, but the work is not happening on the other end. I think just kind of the continuing grounding of like, the work is for me. I'm growing, I'm learning. I feel better about how I carry my loads. And that's enough, right? Like that's enough. That can be enough. Even if at the same time I feel dissatisfied with some parts. So the awareness that some days are going to be better than others, that I'm still benefiting greatly from my own work, even if others are not doing their work, helps me kind of remain in the present with the and valuing my journey, whether or not everybody else is involved or not in it. So that right. I would say that's how I kind of ongoingly have that compassion, right? Like when I have those moments of frustration.
Right. And how are you at receiving these days? Right. We talked about like give, not receiving. Let me give more. With your parents, you were good. Mm-hmm. Not maybe acknowledged as good. Oh, let me be gooder. Gooder is a word. And in our healing, we're having to contrast that reality with receiving. But we've been deprived, neglected, starved, thirsted. And now, some, people in your life, friends, family, loved ones, they bring you water, metaphorically, they bring you food, they bring you love. They say like, you're good enough, Adriana. How is that to receive?
The question initially, I noticed sadness, like a little bit of sadness popped up. And I think that is a part, the little girl that, lives inside still, that just doesn't feel that I get offered water enough, right? Because there's this way that I carry my loads really beautifully, and I've put in a lot of work. I mean, like I've been in my very intensive therapy. I've been doing we've talked about those journeys and like our personal kind of conversations. And so my load, if you see me from the outside, you would think that I need nothing, that I need zero.
Nothing.
Right? And it's not necessarily because I'm hiding it. It's just because I have learned to fulfill my needs, because I have realized that I have been in relationships with a lot of disappointing people that are not going to meet my needs. So I've become an expert of self-nurturing. I do a really good job and it feels really good because I'm attuned to myself and I know when I need a glass of water, when I need a little bit of food, right? And I adjust. And I have my therapist, for example, as like a companion in my journey who gives me that, right? Like who helps me foster that within myself. But when you ask the question, I noticed like the little bit of sadness that I still carry pretty often. I don't think I tap into it all the time or every time that I feel it, but this idea that because I am so far ahead in my journey with myself, because I am carrying my load really well, that because I am successful and happy and I have a really beautiful life, that there may be this assumption from a lot of people that I don't need very much. And therefore I don't get offered very much. So would I be willing to accept more if I was given more? Like, I think so, but I'm still not quite there with my relationships where I'm finding that I'm being offered a lot, but mostly it's because I meet my own needs so well, right? So it's like now my codependent journey of give to others has become an introspective journey of give. Like, what do I need? What do I want? How do I meet my need, right? So I'm like really good at fulfilling my needs at the moment, but there's not a lot of room for others to give. And I'm not sure what that means. Like, it's not a criticism on like how is given. It's just that I'm like, you know, like if you're playing a video game, I'm on like level expert. I'm in like the track of the journey that is like level expert. And I know where like the hidden secrets are at. And a lot of the people that, you know, just people in general, most of them, you know, people are not like in therapy and are not doing like this really intentional work, right? So they're like in their own path. And here I am like, oh, look at this, look at the shiny thing. And everybody's like still passing level 1, right? So it's, yeah, but I think it makes me feel sad. Like I can tap into that sadness of feeling lonely, perhaps that's the word. And this journey of fulfilling my needs that is just very like, it's still a job that I have within myself. It's not coming from other people.
So this spectrum comes to mind for me, these extremes where you grew up needing to be nurtured by parents, by your grandma, and you were totally dependent on that nurturing. And then you grew up into this independent young woman. And now through your healing journey, you have become in your words, an expert self-nurturer. Right? So what is that balance in between? And I sense on different levels in my codependency, I have rejected nurturing myself. I have rejected tending to myself out of, right? I have gone on like thirsty, hungry, needs neglected by other people, but at least I was in relation with other people, right? Like, I think that's the rub for a lot of codependents. It's like, well, if we actually start to meet our own needs, or you know, hold people accountable, hold people responsible, is anybody going to be here?
I think that's super like a valid question that I sit with. I think you named it. You kind of like put words really beautifully around it. Because like, I guess maybe in there too, there is this like lack of trust that if I like somehow it's like, okay, you know what, like let me not be such an expert at nurturing, and then like go to a friend, right? And like, hey, can I tell you about a problem that I'm having, and like hear what you have to say, to have that grace and that open-heartedness that people can be there for me in the ways that they can, and that is enough, right? I think potentially that's something that maybe I should examine a little bit more for myself in terms of what does it look like to receive when I technically don't need very much from anybody, but I would like to be in relationships with people. And I am in relationships with people, but maybe I don't allow myself to receive from them because nobody can give me what I need better than I can, right? And then that becomes like that other end of the spectrum that you're talking about. Just like, how do we find that balance of, even if you can take care of yourself, are there ways that you could still accept from others that nurturing and that care. One of the things that I'm doing tonight, for example, is that my best friend and I were making like a girls' night, like a date. We're going on a date, we're dolling up, and we're gonna go to dinner to a nice restaurant. We're leaving our loved ones at home, and it's just like, because we had this talk about wanting to nurture a relationship, especially with COVID. Like, I feel that I've experienced a lot of just estrangement from people, not in the way that we're in fights or whatever. It's just, we haven't been hanging out. We haven't been seeing everybody. Everybody's been like really concerned about their health and about their safety, right? And so I've been starting to notice how disconnected I feel from people. And so I've been taking some steps to intentionally reconnect with folks in ways that, like, potentially we would think about, you would go on a date with your partner, or you would go on a date with somebody who you're like romantically involved, right? And have like this dolling up and like wine and dine and like, let's make reservations, right? Like usually it's like girls' nights or like girls' time is like casual and like if we have time, right? But I'm realizing that I like want to be in really intentional relationships. And so in order to be in intentional relationships, you got to put effort. So yeah, I think that goes connected into this like spectrum of like, I can go to dinner by myself, but I kind of want to go to dinner with like somebody that I care a lot about. And so, that's like another way of receiving, right? Like being in relationship with people when you don't need from anybody, but you want to. That's what changes. I may not need, but I want to receive and I want to build those relationships.
Yeah. Hope you guys have so much fun. I'm sure you will.
We are so excited. We're just like, oh my gosh, like when was the last time we've like hung out or seen each other or gotten dolled up? That this is all we've talked about, like 2 weeks. It feels so silly because it's just like COVID has taken a lot of the fun away from life, that it's just like, for like very valid reasons, right? And so it's like the highlight when we made the decision, we're gonna go on this date. It's like, what are you wearing? What's your outfit? And like, like being intentional, being excited. And I think we reserve the type of excitement for romantic relationships a lot of the times. And I'm kind of thinking about what it would be like to put the same effort that I put in my partnership, to put that with my friends and like people that I really care about, right? And so it shifts us perspective of how to be in a relationship with people.
Right. I love it.
I'm really excited.
Nice. All right. So in your intro, right, I said, and one of your specialties, your focuses is generational cycles. What do you observe in your clients in their generational cycles of codependency?
One of the patterns that along many of the people that I work with that shows up around codependency is this confusion between codependency and interdependency. Right? You can be interdependent. You can count on people. You can be there for people. I'm not saying like stop answering, to whatever your parents' requests are, or your siblings, or whatever is that is coming up. But it's at what cost? Like I want you just like to take like a quick second and think about, what is the cost? Is there a cost? Is it a cost that you are consenting? I talk a lot about consent. Right? Like we also think about consent in terms of like romantic relationships or sex, but consent actually as a concept can be utilized in every aspect of our lives, right? Like, do I consent to taking this message? Do I consent to this way of being or thinking that others are kind of wanting to impose on me, right? And if the answer is no, then that's where the boundary goes up. So I talk a lot about consenting. And so one of the dynamics that very commonly comes up in terms of generational cycles is this idea of, when I'm in this close relationship with my parents, especially if I'm living with them, I may not have the right to say no. I may not feel that I have the right to say no, feel that I have the right to hold a boundary. And then guilt. That's the other thing. Oh man, like guilt and shame, right? Because if then you deviate or you put a boundary or you say no to something, right, you run the risk of being guilt tripped. That's what we call it, kind of like in colloquial like language, right? Guilt tripped, and engage in this kind of like or triggering this feeling of like, if I don't do this for you, you're going to be upset with me and then cut me off or make me feel, or like try to project some of your feelings onto me. So do those feelings, are they really yours, or are you acquiring them from others? Are others putting them on you? And so therefore, then now you feel like a terrible daughter or a terrible person, you're in a relationship with, or is it that your boundaries and are just creating more space for you to make decisions about what you may want to do or what you may have capacity to do? Because that's the other part, right? Like the self-sacrificing a lot of the times doesn't take into account that every person has kind of this limited amount of capacity, depending on like your work, depending on like other relationships that you're in, the state of the world, right? Like the worries about just everything that's going on around us. But when we are in this enmeshed codependent relationships, there isn't a lot of room for that consideration that you too may have a life going on that may require you to say no, right? And in that same kind of generational cycle, one of the other things that I like talk a lot with folks is about the meaning of no, and a solid no, right? Like a no is a no. Anything that is not a enthusiastic yes is a no. But within the no, there is degrees, right? Like no, not right now, not yet, not today, but yes, tomorrow, right? And learning to kind of like being away from this black and white of yes or no, and being able to build boundaries around, I may be able to do this for you, mom, tomorrow or like Thursday. Is that okay? But people sometimes have a hard time with the no's, and hearing that within the no, there is a spectrum that can happen, right? And so then that's where the emotional sort of kind of battling and the guilt tripping kind of shows up, because we may have to teach people that expressing boundaries, there's still a spectrum, right, that the boundary lives in. And that if you're patient, and that if you let me also be a part of, like, let me have needs and let me decide when can I show up for you best, that you actually benefit greatly from that, because I'm going to show up in a good mood. I'm going to be like sharp. I'm going to actually want to do it. I'm going to be more prepared, versus if you just throw it on me in this moment and you don't give me any room to have that choice to say yes or no, I am going to probably not show up at my best. Right. So it's this kind of like ongoing learning that when we hold boundaries, that when we say no to people that we love, that we're not saying no never, no forever, but then no kind of starts expanding and taking a different meaning. But in terms of the generational cycles, there is the guilt, right, that comes from having like immigrant parents. Like a lot of the people that I work with and myself like have immigrant parents, right? And so one of the things that always comes up is like, but my parents have given up so much for me, and they have done all these things, and they have suffered so much. How can I tell them no just because I'm tired from my office job where I was just on Zoom for 8 hours? And it's like, wait a minute, right? Just because our struggle does not look like the struggle that our parents experience, or X, Y, and Z person, does not mean that our struggle isn't valid, or that our feelings aren't valid, or that our capacity is limited, right? But for a lot of people, this like empathy or solidarity for the struggle of others creates guilt, right? And guilt can be really poisonous, because it pushes you to enter in this cycle of giving, and not receiving very much, because you just feel guilty and you feel that that's the right thing to do, right? And these are things that come from this generational struggles, right? We maybe have seen our parents taking care of their parents, and like, how do you say no to family, right? Or somebody comes from here and then they come to your house, and it doesn't matter whether you have the means to support another person in your home, you just say yes, right? We've witnessed a lot of codependency too, and a lot of, and in the name of interdependency, in the name of community, in the name of collectivism, which there's absolutely nothing wrong with those values. Those values are at the core of who we are as people, right? We are supposed to be connected and we want to be in community. But I believe that there is a way to balance the self needs with the community needs, more in a continuum versus being things that are in opposition. Either I pick me or I pick them, right? Like that's what leads to a lot of this burnout emotionally. It's like, can I pick me while also picking up, we're also taking care of them. And if I take care of me, then I can take care of them even better. And if they take care of me, then I can take care back of them, right? It's kind of, can we be more like in a continuum versus this like two interests being in competition and kind of pulling away? Because it would be denying ourselves of our just human needs for community and for connectivity. We don't want to cut off. Some people might feel that cutting off is the only way that you could achieve this more independent, right? Like where you're just centering yourself, that is only achieved if I completely cut and separate. But that also has consequences, right? Like then it leaves you feeling alone, it feels you feeling separated, the guilt cycle and all of that. And so if there is like a goal, in terms of healing that I see when this kind of issue shows up, is like, how do I as a therapist help people find their own version of balance, of taking care of themselves while also continuing to show up in ways that feel authentic and loving for those who they want to care about, but that they're not at the cost of either, but it's more like in this balance and in this cycle that if one happens, then the other one happens too.
Right. So a generational cycle of not being able to, or not even knowing, not having the option to say no to family, and you helping your clients discern how to say no when it's a no. And it might be a spectrum of no's. And yes, when it's a yes, that's in balance of their needs and that of the community. Yeah. Because they may have grown up.
It's really complicated.
No, right? They may have grown up sensing that, or there was a culture in their family, a vibe, a pattern of if and when someone needs something, grandma drops everything and does it. And then mom dropped everything and did it too. Thus, I need to drop everything. And you can, but you're helping your clients discern at what cost.
Yeah. What I was saying is like, it sounds really complicated, but it really is not, right? Like what I tell them is, can you take a breath, a step, a moment to just say, can I, in this moment, do this? Do I have the capacity to say yes? Do I want to say yes? Am I too tired today to say yes? And so maybe it's a no, but not today, yes, tomorrow, right? And so how do you create just like that brief moment instead of kind of like you described, because my grandma dropped everything, my mom dropped everything to go help, to go do, could do serve, right? And I'm falling into that same dynamic and trap of just like, I will drop whatever I have in front of me. What I want you to ask is just like, wait, what do I want to say? What is my answer? That is not just this automatic yes, right? There's not this autopilot, because we've been modeled these behaviors by people who do it excellently, right? Like the self-sacrificing, it's very in line also with like Marianismo values, right? In Latinx culture, for a lot of the people that I work with and myself in my own experiences, we have machismo on one end, and then we have Marianismo on the other end, right? Marianismo is the implication that women are to serve, to be, to give, to be modest and to be meek and to just say yes to whatever comes their way. And for some people, those values are like the values that they want to live with, but they cost a lot for the self, right? And so if you want to be of service and of support, there is a way to do it in a way that is inclusive of your needs too, right? And that's kind of the part. How do you include yourself as you're about to say yes to something, right? Or you're about to say no to something? And what is that balance for you? And that balance may be from situation to situation, from day to day, from whatever capacity you have in that moment.
Right. I don't know why, but this memory is coming up. This is probably like 10 or 12 years ago, but my dad, we used to take foreign exchange students, and there was a weekend where he, my mom, and one of the students, they were going to go camping. And something happened, my mom got mad at my dad. So she was like, I'm not going. And my dad was like, oh, okay. So now I'm going to go camping with this foreign exchange student all by myself. So he called me and he was like, Marissa, and in a way he conveyed, this won't be appropriate. And the only way we can go is if you come. So you have to come. It's like, did I, was I sitting around wondering like, oh man, I wish I could go camping this weekend with a foreign exchange student that my parents are hosting and my dad? No, I was not thinking that. But I think that they're, reflecting on Marianismo, and even, oh, my parents have done so much. They're paying for my school. My parents did everything for me. So I'm arguably indebted to them forever. But yeah, I just, I think like through modeling and sensing that, that guilt, I said yes, I went. I'm sure it was fine, but I don't even know if there was a breath stepper moment. It just was like, ugh, okay.
And so if I was working with somebody who has like this similar moment, right? Like parent calls and it's like, hey, I need you to do this, right? And it's really important and it's really necessary. Can you take the step and to say, oh, let me look at my schedule and make sure that I can fit it in. I'm thinking is a yes, but I want you to know it may be a no, right? Can you just give yourself like a tiny step, right? Can you just give yourself like the breath to say, wait, do I have anything else going on? What does my weekend look like? What am I going to be self-sacrificing, right? Because sometimes we want to, and we can, and we should, if that feels aligned and that feels right for us. But if you had homework, if you had, a date, if you had a day with romantic date or a friend date, or if you just wanted to like chill and, binge a show that you've been like, maybe the entire month you've been too busy to watch, and that is necessary for your self-care, could you, right? If we use this example, have said, Dad, like, I really understand that this is like something you really want to do. And under other circumstances, I would say yes, but this weekend is just not going to be good for me. Right? Like the idea that we could just say, thank you, but no thank you, maybe next time. Thank you, not today, maybe tomorrow, right? But many of us, the way that we've been in this cycle of watching people just drop everything for others in the moment, does not even give the space to imagine that we could take a moment to consider ourselves before saying yes to others, right? And again, this is not in competition. It's kind of finding a balance between both, because what I want to make sure, not always when I'm having these conversations, is that it's not about like becoming just like on this other end of the spectrum. It's just me, and I'm the only one that matters. No, we're still in a relationship with people, and we should care about them. And if we have capacity and want and desire and ability, why not, right? Like there's no need to be like in this proud, I'm just going to say no because I can, right? Like do what your heart desires. First of all, be in community with the people you want to be in community. Show up authentically you. And if that is as a person of service, that's a person who gives, there's nothing wrong with that. What I want you just to ask yourself is like, is the cost me? And am I saying no to me by saying yes to others? And does this no to me make sense to me? Can I live with it? Can I accept it? Or is it going to build resentment? Because if any yes that you say is just going to foster resentment, then you're just saving whatever conflict you're avoiding in the now for later, because the resentment just gets stored and shows up somehow, some way later on, right? And so if we are more authentically if we're more authentic in the way that we answer and we consider ourselves, our needs and their needs, I think ultimately what that leads is just leads to clarity and to, people also becoming more and more considerate that you as a person also exist. And the hope would be that they, maybe next time that, if we use this example, right, like that a dad calls and says, hey, I need you to drop everything and to do this, they would say, hey, what does your schedule look like? Because this need came up and I'm wondering if you could fit it in your schedule. Do you have time? And then that gives us the room to say, I have time or I don't have time. But is that automatic yes, or the automatic assumption that others have that we're going to say yes, would kind of put us in the cycle of codependency versus interdependency, that we can be dependent of others and be in healthy relationships with others when we also exist and our needs are also alive and taken care of, right?
Right. Yeah. I think I went at the time, again, this is around 20. So I went and yeah, I'm sure at that time I went to be a good, dutiful daughter, right? To win, the weekend long favor of my dad. And I'm sure it threw me off schedule. I'm, maybe I went back to work that Monday feeling behind because I didn't get my weekend errands done, and then dealt with it in very unhealthy and unhelpful ways, and probably felt that now my dad owes me, right? That codependent, like just unhealthy resentment, keeping tabs, like, again, just like literally like an accountant. Yeah. Okay. I drove down and did this. Now my dad owes me everything. Yeah.
One of the words that you use that I kind of want to like pull out and also something that we talk about a lot is like, now I'm in like somebody's good graces because I did whatever
now I'm enough. Now I'm enough.
I'm enough. Exactly. Now I'm enough. Now I'm worthy of your love and I'm deserving of all these good things and good feelings, right? It's like, what a wild idea that if you would have said no to camping, likelihood is that your dad maybe this would have been like an inconvenience, right? It would have been like hard and like maybe the student would have not gone on their trip. But the wild idea here would be that your dad could still love you after you say no. And that's the thing, right? Like that in this generational cycle that we often associate our worth or our just, can I be loved? Can I be accepted when I'm saying no, when I'm putting boundaries? Do I still belong to this family, right? And sometimes people who haven't done their own healing journey and that type of reflection may make you feel like you're not worthy of that love, or that somehow you're like betrayed someone, or right. In healthy relationships, that would not be the case. In a healthy relationship that is reciprocal, right? That is not codependent, but interdependent, the father would hear the no from their daughter and say, you know what, like, I get it. Like, this would put a lot of hardship on you. I'm so sorry that like I try to convince you otherwise. I'll figure it out. Exactly, right? And like it seems so insignificant to engage with people in this way so much, because it's not like a big change. It's uncomfortable at first when you've been a yes person, and when you've been just like, whatever costs, always, right? This is the only way that I'm going to be loved. But in most cases, people will learn to treat you in new ways, but it may not come natural to them. And maybe your work of like establishing those no's, those boundaries. But in a good amount of cases, people can slowly learn to respect your boundaries and your needs. And you become a person too, a person who has wants and needs. And right. And then you model. Now, this also opens the risk that you're now modeling them saying no to you when you come with that request, right? But it's about consenting and entering relationships with the mindset that everybody's needs count, and that everybody is a person who should be considered, right? And that saying no doesn't mean that is a no forever, or that you're no longer worthy or belonging or being loved. It's just a not today, and it's not in the detriment of this relationship. That's secure attachment, right? When you can say no, or you can turn away, or you can go be somewhere else, and you can come back to home base and nothing has changed. The love, the security is still there. And that's like ideally, right? We want to be in securely attached relationships where that object permanency, right? Like that you are there even if you're not there, that you are loved even if you're not self-sacrificing, that you are part of this family even if you have your own life going on, right? But it takes time to readjust these dynamics because they are oftentimes generational. They've been passed down, and this is the way that everybody has learned to be with one another. I'm thinking about, have you watched the movie Encanto? You haven't watched Encanto? Well, if any of the listeners, and also you haven't watched Encanto, and one of the characters is the strong sister, right? Like the one that is the strong one. Each of the characters kind of has like their own role that they play within the family. So one of the sisters is the strong one, right? And her little song is a Disney song, very theatrical. It's like, am I gonna still be loved and worthy if I don't do all these chores and you don't put it on my shoulders and all of that, right? And in healthy families and in healthy relationships, the answer is yes. You don't have to be just a carrier and a bearer of all the things to earn your place in your family or to earn the love of whoever you're seeking that love from. Just showing up as you are, some days strong, some days weak, some days in a good mood, some days in a bad mood, shouldn't impact, right, how others feel about you. Again, that secure relationship. But a lot of us feel we're anxious in our relationships. We're worried that the moment we throw off the dynamic, everything ends and we're never going to get it again. And so that's what keeps people from dropping off the load of their shoulders and having the option to take that breath or that step before answering.
A breath, a step, a moment. All right, well, we're at time. You did say earlier, you were like, everyone benefits from my journey. And I made an asterisk and I was like, I have benefited from your journey, Adriana. Aww. And so I'm so glad that our journeys have joined, not like collided, but just connected. And we'll have to have you on to talk about object permanence. I'm not even going to start, but you dropped that for everybody to Google. And because when you think about it, you're like, what? When you say the phrase, what it means is not what you would think. It's your mom. I know. Everybody. It's mom. So yeah, so I'll have to have you back, but we'll put links to your socials, your website in the show notes.
Thank you.
And yeah, thank you so much.
No, and thank you. And like our synchronicity, right? Like our paths are definitely aligned. Look at us. Gold jewelry with like leopard print. Like this is meant to be today.
Yeah.
Like, I love
this. This is my grandma's actually. So I'm wearing my grandma. Yeah, she's right here. This is from my mom. Oh yeah, I have like family all over me.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Bye, everybody.
Okay, bye.
Hey girl, it's Marissa again. I'm not like a regular podcaster. I'm a cool podcaster, right? Thank you for listening and staying till the end. You can find me on Instagram at Therapy with Marissa. Email me, marissa@codependummy.com. Check out codependummy.com for more information on the show. And baby girl, a subscribe, rating, and review would be much appreciated. Till next time, I want you to remember, if you are feeling unseen, I see you. If you are feeling unheard, I hear you. And if you think that you don't matter, know that you matter to me. I want you to go out there so you can stop playing small and start taking up space, you dummy. And now, the disclaimer. Girl, this is not therapy and I am not your therapist. This podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regards to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, publisher, or guests are rendering any legal, clinical, or other professional service. If you want or need a professional, please find one.